Hey guys, it's your girl Troublemaker Cosplay here, or Serena Jade. And we're gonna finally go over the patterning, cutting out, and making of Supermoon. Yes, this has been on like my cutting room floor for about like 2-3 years at this point. Look, I started this, I think, like kinda at the beginning of the panini. And I lost interest because it took so much out of me. Like, yeah, I think we can all agree, like, the last couple of years have been really crap. Also, I was just kind of dealing with the loss of my grandmother as well, because she did pass away in 2019, and, that was really hard. It's still really kind of hard because she taught me how to sew and everything. But hey, you know what? We're here to make Sailor Moon. So right now, all you see is me tracing out pattern and cutting it out, which is why I had such a long intro because, I mean, there's really nothing that much to narrate right now. It's like, oh, look, I cut a curve. Ooh, yes, I'm cleaning up some of the cuts. Thrilling adventures here. But I do have a pattern that's no longer available, and it's amongst our group. We all trade it, and it's been worked on for quite a bit and kind of perfected. So what we do is we have a one gigantic piece, and it's all sewn together, so there's like no top torso piece or like the skirt coming off. And I like it that way. I don't like the multiple different pieces. I don't think it looks as good. If other people want to do it that way, it's not my preferred method. And then we have the material for one of the golden belts. This is not the material that ends up on this on the transformation uniform, because I ended up getting something different. I didn't like how this one came out. It was a little too costumey for me. And I knew that when I cut it out that I wasn't gonna like it, but I was like, well, I have this and everything just shut down, so we're gonna make it work. And then I was like, no, we're not gonna make this work. I ended up getting Yaya Han's pleather, even though I hate it. Anytime I sew with her pleather, it's always crap. I don't know why. I use different needles. I don't like it, but I made it work for that one. And then for the foam here, I'm using 1/2 inch foam. I think I'm gonna go with the stuff that you can get at Walmart rather than Joann's, just simply because this was really bulky and difficult to sew through. It caused me numerous headaches, and I sewed through one area so much that it kind of ripped, and that's why I ultimately ended up making the belts over again. You can see my displeasure with how it sticks to you. It's annoying. It's one thing I don't like about foam, and like working with like things like that. It's just like it sticks and just like, get off of me. But I'm cutting out all the foam pieces for the belt, and then I top stitch it, and you can kind of see like how difficult it was because of how bulky it was. So like, get a 1/2 inch, but make sure it's not like high density like the stuff you can get at Joann's. I showed it right before I started working, so like look for stuff, because I know New Cosplay got our last foam from Walmart, so I would definitely suggest going with stuff like that. Like, it's a little not as dense. It's good for seats and everything, but just not for belts. And then the reason why I sew it on top is just so that way I can make sure that it doesn't move when I go back in later. The thing about me is I learned if you do it right the first time, you don't have to go in and do it again the second time. And that's something I've always kind of taken to heart when I go through sewing and everything. It's like, if I do it right the first time, I don't have to worry about it again. And that's kind of like how I sew Sometimes I just go and be like, no, it's okay, Serena. We can totally do it. It's fine. And then it's like, you're an idiot. You should have, like, listened to yourself. So, yeah, that's just kind of like one of my rules in life. And then now we can see the front view. I love getting I like getting kind of views like that just simply because, I don't know, I like seeing how the needle works. Don't question this. Just go with it. And like I said, you can see how I'm having trouble with putting it through the machine and everything. It was very taxing on me because I'm just like, this is not coming out how I like it. I think for this one, I ended up whip stitching it so that way it gets a nice point for it. And then I wanted to make sure that it was going to fit around my waist because the first time that I made Super Fuku, I had to have like people help take it off of me because it was so form fitting, and my figure, it has very drastic measurements to it. There's always like 11 inches difference between my bust line, waist, and hips. So I was like a little sardine in a can. And now you can see me going through and just kind of trimming down some of the bulk as much as I can. Just because I was like, if I'm already having trouble sewing, the point together on one, what is it going to do when I try to sew it, the second time around? So I just really wanted to try and trim down as much bulk as I could. And that led to it never coming off of me. Oh, look, I was on my hoarder's kick when I was doing this. And for this, I chose to use clips. If you don't have any clips, I highly recommend and suggest that you get some, just simply because there was no way I was going to be able to pin this behemoth. I tried, and the first time I drew blood, because, it's not a true costume unless it draws blood from you. I was like, we're not going to fight with this. On second thought, I could have probably used like a zipper foot for this, and that might have worked a little bit better, but I just didn't think of it in the moment. So that's something to keep in mind. Yes, we jump to 3 years in the future, Serena, and you can kind of tell the situation has changed. I think this was when I moved downstairs in our old house, because I've started streaming, and my spouse was like, well, if you don't have enough room upstairs, then just go downstairs. Like, that's plenty of room. And that's kind of been our jam ever since. So I control the downstairs and the kitchen area. So yeah. And then I also recommend like a lightning stitch. It's not a full-on zigzag stitch, but it's like a small little zigzag stitch. For brother machines, it's usually like stitch number 3. And I highly recommend using it on all your stretchy projects because I've never had it really break on me when doing stretch material. And I just don't like how the zigzag stitch looks on stretch material. I'm very meticulous and particular about how things look. And so I usually go with like whatever looks like it lays down best. I saw some of the thread and everything on one Harley Quinn, and I asked her how she had done it, and she said it was like a zigzag stitch, and I'm like, oh girl, you can tell it's a zigzag stitch, No tea, no shade against her, it's just I prefer doing it that way. Okay, and now here you see me putting in the seam allowance for the point, and I'm gonna let past Serena handle it because she does the explaining and I don't have to. And this is just kind of time filling right about now. Okay, So how to do the point in the midsection for a sailor fuku. I earlier sewed 2 lines like right here, and then on the opposite fabric I also sewed that point too. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pin those 2 together and then pin along. I have to stretch this a little bit. So, you're gonna pin along and then use this line right here that I had done earlier as well, as kind of like a guide for, seam allowance and everything. You have to maneuver this fabric to get it to sit, and I'm going to include that in the next clip. But this is probably one of the easiest ways. New Cosplay taught me this when I first started making my fukus. So you have to make sure that this point is matching up with the other side as well. Thank you, Past Serena. So yeah, basically I had gone through and put in the seam allowance edging as like a basting stitch, and then I just used that as a guide for, the entire torso piece, because the torso and the bust piece are one, like I said, it's all one uniform, and using that as a guide will help you get the curve of the uniform. I hope that explanation helps. Like, it's the best that I can come up with, and you also have like visual of me going through it right now. I did have to like tug and like make sure that it was straight, because it was kind of bunching, and I mean, like, that's not too bad, but it was just really annoying to do. And now I'm going through and finagling the point and everything. It was so annoying to get it. Like, I hate doing the points on the moon. It gets easier as you go on, but it's annoying. It is. And I can't tell you how it comes out with like a nice little curve. I just know that it works. And I clip the center of the curves, like where the 2 halves meet, so that way the fabric can move a little bit more freely. Now I'm just going back over and, stitching it again, so that way I can have, like, in case one area might break, I have like a backup, essentially. And then, you have to go through and remove the basting stitches, which is always like the worst. Oh, and when you do basting stitches, make sure that you do it on like the longest stitch. Now I'm just adding the belt and everything. Again, clips here, because screw that noise of like trying to pin it. No, that's not for me. That life is not for me. Nope. So yeah, ever since I invested in those clips, they've been like they're the real MVPs, I'm not gonna lie. And I also invested in some glass bead tops for pins while you're ironing. Never had a pin melt on one of my projects, but yeah, it's me. You never know. Also, now we're getting to the skirt process, and this is a very tedious process. And basically what's going to happen is that you're going to take your fabric, and it has to be wet but not too wet, and then you have to have I use acrylic paint and a mixture of fabric paint. I don't like the fabric paint. And you have to wet your acrylic paint, because acrylic paint will stain and dye whatever you use on it. And then you have to basically paint your material, and then you have to make sure that your fabric is bone dry, otherwise all the progress that you had just done you'll lose pigment, essentially. Now you see me here with my secret on how I did it, and this is the best way that I figured out, because like every other way I did not like doing it. So I decided to take thread and then use a ruler to measure along the bottom to make sure I get a nice curve and everything. It was so funny. My friend Lunar Lynn was like, Serena, you do realize that the manga isn't like a full on gradient effect, right? Like there's separation. I'm like, I know, but I want gradient. Don't like anytime somebody's like, you do realize this, and I'm like, I know, but you're not going to tell me no. I'm Serena Jade. You can't. No. I'm stubborn like that. So I just did that, and it's kind of like on a repeat of all the layers. This is a very much like, this is an act of love when you do this. Like, you have to love being tedious and meticulous like I do. And I have put 900 zipper stoppers on an edge of a costume when I did Loki, because that's what I loved. And I had a bruised hand for that entire time. So I'm only showing you one side of the skirt because, oh my gosh, it would be such a long video if I include the entire thing. Because, yeah, I think I spent like a grand total of 30 hours working on the skirt. Like I said, it is definitely an act of love when you do this. And next time I make this, because I'm going to be selling this version of the Super Fuku eventually, because I just did not like how it came out. I won't be using fabric paint just simply because it bleeds. Like the blue was fabric paint and you can see how much it bled. And it was really annoying to work with. And then you see me taking a shortcut here by having a sponge that I measured out to be 2 inches. And you just being like, that's good enough. Let's just go. I want to get done with this. My spouse has sensory issues. And he was working, so I had like a limited amount of time to, blast the blow dryer, because again, you have to make sure it's completely dry every single time. If you want to build up color, you have to blow dry it. You have to make sure that it's dry, otherwise you will lose pigment. Believe me, I tried fudging it one time and it did not work. Learn from my mistakes. They're numerous. And then also, you want to make sure that your thread isn't laying flush against the material, because it'll soak up water and paint and then it'll leave little marks and everything. Just make sure you have to pay attention to that too. And you have to make sure your fabric is completely wet, like everywhere, otherwise it will start like spreading and bleeding onto different parts. So like all the little places where you see like on the top of the material, you can see like I hadn't had it fully wet up there, and so it kind of like just spread up. I mean, like, it's cool, I'm not upset about it, but it was just kind of annoying. This is not for the faint of heart. The way I do it is not for the faint of heart. And even then, I'm still like, it's still not full-on gradient. It's not how I want it, And then the green is also a mixture of fabric paint and, like, acrylic paint. And this is where you can really see how it did bleed up. And that's what I'm talking about. So definitely just going to stick with acrylic paint. I know one of my other friends wants to use fabric paint, and she can do that if she wants. It's not my cup of tea. There are definitely parts where I'm like, you're going in the back of the dress, because I can pleat you and you're not going to be able to see it. Also, for the sponges, you want to make sure that they're, clear of pigment. They're going to get stained, and that's okay, but you want to give them like a good squeezing out, because they will retain pigment, and then you'll have blue on top of your yellow. I learned that on my last skirt, so be wary of that. I usually have a couple different sponges that I like chop up and use for different areas, and like for the in-betweens and everything like that. So that's something to be cognizant as well. And then I also have like 2 different little areas full of like bowls of water. So that way I can use one to like dip fabric in, and then use my little spray bottle when it starts to get a little too dry for me. You know, a spray bottle was like a gigantic game changer for me, because then I didn't have to continuously like take my fabric and dunk it into a bowl of water, squeeze it out. You know, I had more control over how wet the fabric got when it came to that. So yeah. And now we're doing the pleat. Okay, I did not include the pleating in there because, like, if you are coming to this for like pleating, there's tons of videos on pleating. I cut the pleating just simply because of time. So there are a bunch of different tutorials on YouTube you can find. It's not here. Not sorry about that. This video is already like 31 minutes long, so hey, you know, you got some good quality content there. Now I'm just measuring out how far down I want the V to go. I did make the skirt a bit longer than what my other crew has, because we are very meticulous when we do groups that everyone's uniform. And I demand uniformity when it comes to this. I'm a stickler on that. I'm like, I don't care what else you do. Like, it has to be uniform, essentially. And now, you know, I'm just like overthinking it. And I'm like, I just spent so long on this skirt. And like, what if this happens? Me. And you can kind of see towards like the left of the screen how like some of the yellow got all muddied and everything. That's what happens when you like don't fully dry your material. It will happen. Trust me. Now I'm just making like, I'm pinning down the V and everything. So that way I can go in and top stitch, so that way I don't lose the, oh my gosh, why am I having a brain fart right now? So that way I can top stitch it down so I don't lose the pleats. Yeah, that's it. Do we have a script for this? No. Is this completely unpolished? Yes. Does that have a charm? Sure. This is what we're doing. And now I'm making sure that the chalk line is nice and like vivid. So, you know, I go through, top stitch it. There's really nothing special about the top stitching or anything like that, just simply because it's a straight line. Ooh, wow, ah, straight line, so cool, ooh. And then what I did here was I measured out seam allowance, so that way I can kind of chop off 1/2 of the C, or 1/2 of the V, and then just mirror it on the other side, so that way I had like kind of like a perfect V. Because last time I did it, when I made my last super fuku, I didn't 100%, like I didn't get it straight, and it just annoyed me. It could have also been like the entire fuku was kind of a mess, but it was a pretty mess, but it wasn't how this one is. This is definitely a different beast, you know. The different one, I didn't like use a ruler to act as a guide. So yeah, now I'm just going through, repeating the process. I'm gonna add some seam allowance, you know, fun things like that. You know, I could probably put some, you know, music over this, and that'd be great, but like, I don't know. I'm stuck in that entire process of, if I don't try too hard on something, then if I fail, then it's not like that devastating to me. So, you know, that's where we're at mentally. I'm working to overcome that. Like, I have a lot of issues with control and self-doubt, and just, I had an abusive childhood, so, you know, that's a thing. I'm also bipolar too, so yeah. And then this isn't the fuku or the collar that I used in this one. This is like from 3 years ago. I like listening to music and just being really kind of joyful and weird when I do things. Like, that's just how I craft. You can see me playing. This was when I was testing out different processes for the collar and everything, and when I first started, you have to make sure there's no bubbles. If bubbles are bad, that will create like impact sites. You can kind of see right now what I'm talking about. Yeah. So yeah, this is just some color footage that I worked really hard on and I didn't want to like get rid of, but it's not the collar that I went with. So, that I don't know what happened with that video. Also, camera angles and like camera sizing and everything changed because I was using different cameras, We're just gonna run with it. This is what I got. I hate being bipolar and having complex PTSD because it makes everything 10 times harder and suckier because I'm always self-guessing and self-doubting, and it's just not fun. I had so much paint in my bathtub when I poured all the paint down the the bathtub. That's probably like not the greatest way to get rid of it, but it was a thing I did and never again. I just didn't know how to get rid of all the paint. And then like I didn't want my spouse to be like, "What are you doing?" and like having to explain to him. Oops. I know why I didn't like the coloring on this was because it would start at the pandemic and everybody had bought out all the acrylic paint, and so I was stuck with like trying to be a mad scientist in it and like mix everything up and be like, yeah, this is gonna work, and I'm like, I hate it. So yeah, next time I do this, I'm definitely gonna be a little bit more a stickler on the colors and everything, and definitely get a wider variety of acrylic paint and making sure that I like the colors and I think they flow together, because I don't really think this flows together, and that's kind of like why I'm like not too happy about it, So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this rambling mess of a video. We're just gonna roll with it, and we're gonna do what we can where we can, because that's all you can do in life is try. Yeah, it's been fun making cosplays, and I've wanted to do this since I started like making videos and everything, so this is kind of like a life goal of mine. It's the tiniest life goal that I have, but it's still like a tiny little goal for me, a little nugget of excitement. But yeah, so definitely check out my Instagram and check out my Twitch. We do mostly cooking streams, but I have been working on a full lace front Sailor Moon wig. I'm making one completely by hand, no wefts, just individual venting knots and everything like that. So that's a lot of fun. Yeah, we cook a lot because I like cooking, Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.